Now, evidence that many Americans don't know or understand civics indicates that there's a need for better civic education in schools, yet American public schools are not always prioritizing civics and social studies. Indeed, just today, the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy published a policy brief titled "When and Why Did America Stop Teaching Civics?" Joining us now is Liam Julian, Director of Public Policy at the O'Connor Institute for American Democracy. Liam, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Policy brief, when and why did America stop teaching civics? Before we get too far here, define civics.
Civics defined would be the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. But, you know, if you think of it in terms of civics education, you're thinking about a government class, you know, where you would debate policy issues and learn about the workings of government.
So when and why did America stop teaching this stuff?
11:32 a.m. No, it's a long story. And that's part of the reason why we put out this brief, is because we wanted to be able to condense it in a way that a reader could easily understand what happened here. And so when I say it's a long story, the background is that, you know, civics is not incidental to American public education. It used to be core, and you can read the Founding Fathers on this, how important it was to teach people civics in a new nation founded on ideas. And this was incredibly important going into the 19th century when we had all these waves of immigration. That became even more important. And as we know, you know, there's a trickle-up effect. What's learned in schools is also, students pass it to parents. Story mostly continues until the 1960s. And the 1960s is when we first start to see a shift in civic education in this country.
Why the shift? What happened in the 60s? Was it mostly political? What went on there?
What happened in the 1960s is, for the first time in a sustained way, critics began saying, this civic education that we have is too one-size-fits-all. There's a diversity of students in these classrooms coming from all different backgrounds. There's a diversity of perspectives on the United States. So this disagreement started bubbling up. But I think what's more important for your viewers is that we remember the 1960s, or, you know, we learned about the 1960s.
Some of us do, Liam. Yes, we do.
Yeah. These disagreements were not sort of Oxford-style debates and people in bow ties. They got pretty personal. Identity was part of it. They got kind of vicious. And so if there's one thing that from this brief that I think your viewers should take away, it's that when civics becomes controversial, when it's perceived as the disagreements become personal, when it gets kind of nasty, this is when schools start to back away from teaching it.
So what do you do to keep it, A, from being controversial, too controversial, and B, get these institutions back to teaching government, and doing so in a way, okay, a feather might be ruffled, but you can't ignore the whole thing. Is that what's being done right now?
Well, in some instances, yes. I mean, education, obviously a hyper-local issue, so in different places, different things are happening. But you can imagine a situation where there's a course that's causing controversy. The hard thing to do is to get everybody in a room and go through that course and take all the time and effort to try to see what should be in, what should we take out. That's hard if everyone in that room is working toward a productive goal. But if everyone's screaming at each other, that hard work is almost impossible work. So what we need to do is really dial down the rancor on this.
Should there be federal guidelines?
Well, there are some federal guidelines in civics, but I mean, again, because it's such a local issue, these decisions get made by local school leaders, districts, states. We are seeing some positive momentum. You know, both at the district and school level, at the state levels, where people, I think, are recognizing something has to change here. So
something else that has changed over the years is this concentration on STEM, on things that are not necessarily civics engaged. You're talking about science, you're talking about math, You're talking about all these kinds of things that help prepare kids for the workforce. And it sounds to me like civics kind of took a back seat to all this.
Yeah, that's a great point. The clearest example of this, the easiest to see, is the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002, which tied federal funding for schools to math and reading test scores. Schools taught math and reading more and more and more. There's only so many hours in the school day, so civics was sort of a casualty of this. But like you're saying, STEM is the same. And nothing against STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, very important. Federal funding for this skyrockets, federal funding for civics.
And with that, I would imagine educators become less comfortable, even less knowledgeable in teaching civics.
We hear in survey after survey of educators that they don't feel prepared to teach civics. They don't know exactly, to your first question, they don't know exactly what civics is. What is it that I'm supposed to be conveying? And then they don't know how to teach it in such a contentious environment where they can't be sure that a discussion in a classroom won't blow up into something bigger. So that's the sort of environment in which they're working.
So last question, this report, what do you want folks to take from this report?
I would say two things. Number one, I was thinking of this on the drive over. It's sort of like the equities markets where when a sector is unloved or overlooked, that might be the time to think, I'm not giving investment advice, but that might be the time to sort of buy. And I think we're at a moment in this country where people are starting to buy civics because we're starting to see some momentum. People are starting to see what happens when we have decades without civics education. So I think there are good things happening, but if I could say anything to your viewers, it would be dial down the anger, dial down the rancor, because nobody will get what they want in that environment. Compromise is often portrayed as sort of a nice thing, a nice to have. We see in this study, it's a necessary thing to get anything done in this space.
Yes, to get anything done in a lot of spaces,
Sure.
You need to understand that. Liam Julian, again, O'Connor Institute for American Democracy. Good stuff. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.